All right. So today we speak with Kelly Vaught. He is a partner at Vaught and an experiential veteran. Vaught is a Los Angeles-based brand experience agency with expertise in experiential and events marketing. Vaught puts experience at the core of their work, helping clients grow and generating countless smiles along the way. They've created moments for people to come together with brands like Nike, Red Bull, Toyota, to name a few. And their goal is to leverage and add value to unique experiences that strengthen and celebrate community and connection. Kelly's also the founding member of the World Experience Organization, a nonprofit where experienced thought leaders gather, collaborate, and innovate in order to increase the impact of experience, that is, increase profits, improve well-being, and build a better society. Welcome to the Activate Your Audience podcast, Kelly.
Thanks for having me. Pleasure to be here.
So excited to chat, and we'll jump right into it. So if you don't mind, what would you say, or if you don't mind giving us kind of a Cliff Note version of what got you where you are today as an experiential leader, in your agency, what was kind of like your journey in Cliff Note versions, if that's possible, of where you're at today?
Sure. I'll cut to sort of how I started in experiential. I was at a juncture in my career where I was working for myself out of my home in an electric sign business. I would design and sell electric signs for, hotels and banks and whatever, video stores back in the day. And was making a decent living, but I just wasn't feeling very rewarded. I've never done things for money. I've always done things for some purpose. The rest is always kind of taken care of itself in my experience. And so my wife encouraged me just to kind of open myself up to the universe to see what might come back. And so I placed a rather generic ad on Craigslist 20 some odd years ago. Got a
Wow.
call from a guy, and I looked up the website. It was a horrible website at the time, but I was like, hey, this looks fun. They were doing events and surf and skate and BMX and moto, and I ride motorcycles and skate and whatnot. So I was like, that seems good. Went to interview, and I showed up in a suit. And Mark Billick, the founder, was in shorts and a t-shirt, having just jogged around. And I thought, wow, I don't know if I'm making a good decision here or not. Let me just see what's up. And so he said, we're hiring someone part-time. How much an hour do you want to make? And I said, listen, pay me whatever you want. I'm not here for a job. I'm looking at a career, and I'm a decent marketer and salesperson. Do you think we can really grow this thing and do some big things? And he said, well, that's my hope. And so I said, well, let's just work and see if it works out. So he said, I worked the first day. And he goes, that's great. Come back tomorrow. And I was like, great. Come back tomorrow. And I said, okay, you said part-time. What does that mean? He goes, just keep coming back. So I never did work part-time. I started full-time. About a year into it, we really vibed on our approach to business and made me a partner. And there was just him and I and his brother in a garage in Hollywood at the time, the garage of his house, actually. And so we just kind of put our head down and started, neither of us had agency experience. We were just people who enjoyed what we did and kind of, doers,
Yeah.
head down, get shit done. And so it just kind of grew from there. That's not very much Cliff Note, I guess, is it?
No, I mean that's all kind of part of the origin. There's so much to pull there. But even like, I don't know, I think that's sort of see the hustle and like the stick to itness. Is there any of those trends that you see still today? Because something that pops out, especially now what experiential is now versus, 20, 25 years ago, it being a more grounded form, right? For all sides of clients and sort of campaigns. Now it's a standard, so to speak, especially after COVID with pent up demand. But is there anything from like those first days, whether it was the focus of, as you mentioned, kind of putting your head down and just creating, just kind of chugging away, whether it's, the back of house stuff for the agency as far as like client outreach, improving, the system, sales, servicing, or even like the innovation side of, the actual execution of things. What has stayed through in your mind from that time to then that is still kind of maybe, obviously there's no true isms, but a sort of like value approach or fundamental that you still apply today, or even the agency applies today?
Yeah, it's going to sound very cliche, but it's really putting the customer first, right? And that customer is either your client, because we're sort of in the B to B to C
Yeah.
business. And I hesitate to even use that term. In all our marketing materials, I eschew the term consumer. They're people, they're your guests, they're your customers, perhaps, they're an audience, but consumers is dehumanizing. And we're in the business of IRL, man, and connecting people and making an emotional impact. So number one is my business partner, Mark Billick, who founded the company. He came from the service industry as a restaurant manager. Hey, you realize they need water before they have to ask for it. This kind of
Yeah.
proactive, get ahead of it, and really make sure that you're tending to them. So when you do that with both your client and their a customer, that is critical, and that hasn't changed since day one. I think it's probably more important now than ever because the use of technology, while serving many benefits, it also can create a gap or a chasm or a distance between you and the person you want to communicate with and motivate. So that's probably number one. The other thing is, and it kind of counter to the hustle culture. When I said head down, get stuff done, it wasn't in the same context of the hustle culture you'll see on LinkedIn or other platforms today. It really
Okay.
was more about a desire to serve. I've always wanted to serve my community at some level. This is how I get rewarded in life. I take pleasure and pride in taking care of my family, knowing my neighbors and being there for them. And that community, small or large, it's all the same. So that sort of selfless approach is a constant in our approach to business, recognizing that technologies are tools. And so we don't worship at the altar of data, and we don't just insert VR or AR because it's the shiny new thing. We try to make things purposeful and stay laser focused on, whatever the goal is that we've, agreed with the client we're trying to achieve.
I love that. Yeah, especially as you mentioned it with any of these, there's always going to be new technologies, new ways of doing, as well as just as you mentioned, the service approach, right? That is a fundamental. And then even just human to human connection, which in the world of everything that is not IRL, that is digital, the consumer, customer, human being is very, very wary of their attention, right? And it's kind of like this double-edged sword because for us, obviously, it's helped that there's been this education of sorts, but also like almost it came from, I would say, in part, a disrespect to the end consumer, to the experience of just kind of, for lack of a better term, kind of pouring out attention, right? Or being at this slot machine of, whether it's the algorithm or everything that is, just getting people's attention, where now within our industry or within what is experience, it is this sort of real life thing that somebody could sort of ignore, the brand ambassador or the experience or the activation, but it's a lot easier, specifically with an authentic message, with quality folks operating it, that they will engage human to human. And then brand goals, client goals, agency goals can be met in a exchange that is, proper like value and service, right? Giving time for attention, etc. But one of the things that stand out and that has come to mind recently for me is, as you mentioned it, with technology as a tool, there have been, and there always is like a pro and con. So I love that mention of, having this, not worshiping these things, but it's like since the beginning of time. Have you ever read Sapiens, the book?
Of course. I've read
So it's
almost
like
everything
that
he's written.
idea, it's so like true to this day. That idea where we were, I think he mentions like the agricultural revolution, the technology of that time being worshipped. And yeah, it's a good thing. But just like technology, it's great that we can connect on Facebook with, my family in South America. But also there are cons to being kind of like super connected to everybody, where everybody's thoughts are not thought out and they just, blurt stuff out there. So that idea from an agency and a personal perspective of both kind of, respecting the mediums and not being owned by them is super interesting.
Yeah. If I were to distill it down to one word, I think you have to care. If you care about something, then you're going to give it the attention it deserves. That's going to be noted by whoever you're speaking with or interacting with.
That's so true. Now, shifting gears, what are some of maybe your favorite or most effective ways to establish a foundation for any brand activation? Do you have any go-to practices or sort of infrastructure that you look at and how you
Yeah.
think about that?
I always start with a clear definition of what are we trying to do here, right? What is the definition of success? You kind of alluded to this earlier. In the past, Experiential, sort of the redheaded stepchild of the industry, right? And again, no offense to redheads or stepchildren. I'm a stepchild. But, it was, oh, we got a couple of bucks left over, go do some stunty thing or whatever. And more it's been elevated to the table with the rest of the marketing channels on what it means to really connect. So you got to define what is it, what says, hey, we were effective, we did what we set out to do. And that could be a number of things, at least in my line of work. It sometimes is we're launching a product. We just need people to be aware of it. We want people to test it, taste it, drive it, wear it, whatever that is, use it in person, because we feel that's a very strong, powerful means of getting to say, okay, I need or want this product. Sometimes you or want to change perception. There's some bad PR or something happened, industry wise, category wise, or otherwise, we have to change perception. Sometimes it's about sales. We're trying to, at the end of the day, it's always about sales. Let's just be clear about that. But, perhaps it's on-site sales or a drive to, we're trying to shorten the decision-making process between awareness and purchase. And so, other times we just, brand awareness. So what is it? What is that thing that we're trying to do? The second thing is who would benefit most from this? Um, and that can be a struggle because sometimes the brand thinks they want to be somewhere for reasons that may or may not be as important as others. So identify who will most benefit both on the end user side, the guest side, and the brand side. And so where are they? Whether it's online or in person, what are they doing? This is why you see big music festivals, for instance, are very popular for brand activations, for instance,
Yeah.
because there's a certain element to that audience that you can identify perhaps and say, okay, they like music, or they like being communing together, or they like being outdoor, or they like, whatever that is. We and this, our product speaks to them and they will benefit from that. So let's go seek them out in those communities. When we want to leverage the power of celebrity or influence, who are those individuals who are authentic, that perhaps are already serving this community, perhaps even using my product? How can I support them and collaborate with that community and demonstrate that we care about this community? I'm not just trying to shove an ad in your face. I'm not trying to pick your pocket for whatever nickel you have. I want to contribute to this community. So establishing those kinds of things at the beginning, doing your diligence and strategy and research of where these folks are, you know, trying not to paint a brush over everyone and said everybody that goes to a music festival is going to like this because they're all the same, or everybody who speaks this language are all the same. You got to avoid that, and kind of take a macro view of the community that you're trying to speak to. And there might be
Yeah.
different ones for different occasions. So
Hmm.
anyway, that's sort of the basis that starts to jump off of where we might design the experience or the journey.
Yeah, no, that's super helpful. And I mean, yeah, the what and the who are obviously fundamental. Now, kind of, I don't know if it would translate, but going now into maybe again back of house from the agency, from the in the business, as a leader and someone directing and providing guidance for team members, for your colleagues, do you or how do you nurture your own mindset, character, and skill development throughout, this journey or even currently?
Yeah. We encourage curiosity. It's it's how you learn, right? And we should always be learning. For instance, anecdotally, have been self-taught musician, have been playing the guitar for 40 years.
Nice.
Never had a lesson. Recently, I started taking lessons. Not only because I wanted to get better at playing the guitar, which I'm very comfortable around the instrument, but any musician knows you're constantly, there's always more. Um, and I told my wife, I go, I thought I was taking guitar lessons, but I'm not. I'm taking lessons in humility, accountability, discipline, listening. Being curious, being willing to learn, not thinking you have all the answers as a leader and as a learner is something we try to encourage and nurture and welcome. We try to create a psychologically safe space for our employees so that they can bring their full self to the table. When you're comfortable and you're not having to code shift or put on a facade, not to say that behaviors might modify to the circumstances, but when you're able to bring your full self to the table, you're going to get the best work out of someone. And when people feel free to speak up, and be willing to say, "Hey, I need help. I don't know the answer." Or, I volunteer. I have an idea that might make this better. That's the kind of environment we try to nurture. We have regular weekly meetings. We have a Monday morning meditation for mental wellness. We really try to value each individual, um, so that they are comfortable and are able to do the best and feel good about it. And that just, when you're around somebody that just feels good, that makes you feel good, right?
Yeah.
And so that's at the fundamental level, excuse me, what we try to nurture, and I think we've been very good at doing that. Clearly, we want people to be effective and good at what they're doing and to get better. And so we encourage and provide opportunities for people to take classes or attend a conference, or we do mentorships both internally and externally.
Yeah.
So again, I guess holistically look at the whole person, not just, oh, you're a social media person and you're the creative and you're the sales guy and you're an accountant. We try to, work life, all that. It's all one thing. We're all on this journey for a limited time on this rock hurtling through the cosmos. So yeah, everything affects everything. So when you have this holistic view of your employees, one another, yourself, your clients, their customers, all of that is a priority for us, what we lead
Yeah,
with.
yeah, no, it's amazing because especially as we know within certain industries, right? There's certain norms, maybe culturally within like entertainment agency space. Sometimes there is this, maybe not always toxicity, but there's a level of that of just because of, the urgency, the nature of the clients, nature of, fast shifting personalities, egos, etc. Like I think as you mentioned it seems so commonsensical, but it's not really, applied a lot where nurturing the whole human, why wouldn't that obviously give you a better return, again, from bottom line, strictly speaking, on that investment? And so I really love that approach and just turning the wheel or turning the mirror, I should say, back on the individual. It's like that's sort of the reason why I think business is also very important. I think for an individual, right? For us who start agencies, who start as whether you're a freelancer, you're still operating as a business. This sort of requirement for curiosity, for humility, for all of these character traits that require you to level up, to as a guitarist or a pianist trying to practice their keys or their chord progression, like you will hit those moments of, yes, that's an individual kind of struggle of like, how do I surpass this without having a sort of crash or despair? Like, no, you keep practicing, right? And you accept the teacher. And the same thing with teams, right? Now you have 2 humans, 3 humans, 4 humans, a team with individual personalities, with individual roles. And the same thing, how do we mirror each other? And so I think that's that cultivating of obviously a container with like the meditative practices, the sort of like culture is difficult, right? It's not an easy thing to do, but it is certainly something that I think is worth its weight in gold.
You have to be intentional about anything you do. And so it can't just be performative. You can't be trying to check a box or for appearances. Again, it goes back to care. Uh, so yeah, that when you're intentional about it, you care about it, you'll be better suited to be consistent. And that's where the good stuff comes in. Repetition, habits, creating consistency is how you grow, right?
Yeah, no, it's absolutely that makes sense. Now, kind of again, jumping back out into the world of on the business, on the field, when it comes to operations, what would you say are some of the most prevalent challenges in the work that we do or that you do?
Well, the obvious ones are weather, for instance. I mean, if
Act
it
of God.
starts raining and windy and this and that, those are things you can't really control. So those are challenges. Because you try to prepare for everything. First thing we tell everyone is don't get married to the outcome, because we're on our industry, what we do, it's going to shift and change. We're constantly
Oh yeah.
reacting, but you try to think of everything and have a plan B for those moments. Another one is to not get caught up on the sexiness of what we do, because a lot of times we get to do some cool stuff with some cool brands, perhaps uh, people we admire and respect. But the real magic is in the unsexiness. It's in the logistics, the attention to detail, the preparedness, the tracking, the accountability and response. Hey, this is not working. Let's shift it. This is working. Why? All of that stuff that happens behind the scene is so critical. Uh, and but that's the stuff that makes the magic, but it's the behind the scenes unsexy side. So that's, especially with the younger, newer employees who might be, working behind the stage at something where the music festival or a sporting event with athletes and this and that. And you've just got to make sure that you're putting the client and their guests ahead of yourself and your own, desires, and just to try to deliver excellence.
That's so true. It's almost like the dull and boring work is part of caring, right? Because in any of these, if you're not in the industry, a lot of these things can seem very, novel and exciting, which they are, right? But it's still a job, right? And it's still work, and work is work, right? You could love it, but it still requires this sort of, like any art, contribution and maybe sacrifice. And as you mentioned, again, that sort of idea that you put it so well, of the one word could be caring. If you care, no matter where you're at, you're gonna be a lot less selfless, which would mean, yeah, you're obviously not fanboying and fangirling or being in a self kind of fulfilling situation or approach, but your intention is, again, to be of service. So I love that. And so wrapping up, I think last question here would be, what has been the most rewarding work, and what else are you looking forward to accomplishing in your career?
You know, it's difficult to say and almost anything. What's the one, the best, the number one? There's a couple of things. One thing I really find rewarding is giving people an opportunity to have a career, to learn something, to do something they enjoy. I get paid for it, be able to start their own business or do whatever. I really take a lot of pride and joy in that. I've had many employees go off and start their own businesses, sometimes in this industry, sometimes out, and several, not to humble brag here, but several have come back and just, demonstrate and express their appreciation and gratitude for our willingness to support that, to give them those tools, and not to be envious or angry if they decide to go off. That's the cycle of life. For centuries, communities value the elders, and you pass on the lore and the knowledge to the next generation, and they do, and so forth. And this is how communities sustain. And so I kind of try to apply that to the business model. I like mentoring. At this stage of my career, we have so many talented people. I don't have to get into the weeds. We've got people that are doing sort of the heavy lifting, and I can kind of look forward and look on the horizon to help lead where we're going, and at the same time spend time outside of our bubble so that we're staying in touch with whatever else is going on, because we in marketing we live at the intersection of culture, and we have to know what trends are happening, because that's just where people are moving towards, and we can't be stuck in one place. So when you're doing what we do, you can be very focused and hyper focused, and sometimes it's very long and arduous days and hours. So someone needs to be able to step outside and go, okay, that's great. I went outside and saw what's going on. I'm gonna bring a little bit back in to help
Right.
shape what we're doing next. And then, of course, there are just a couple of events that I was just really stoked to be a part of. We built a skate park on a barge in New York for Nike Go Skate Day one year, and it was just super fun and fantastic.
Nice.
And working on the project with Red Bull Stratos, where Felix skydived out of space, just to be a part of a moment in history.
Yeah.
Not that I'm looking for a legacy, but it was really exciting to say, hey, man, we were part of that team that did something aspirational. That's pretty rewarding as well.
I love that. Yeah, I mean, and even that idea I think has been coming a lot more to the forefront. I don't know if I think as you mentioned it is kind of a common thing of, yes, the mentorship, but I think part, or at least what it feels like, is in our society today, kind of grooming and cultivating the next kind of doers, as you mentioned, not necessarily for legacy, but for the sake of serving, the industry, the community, that sort of uh, guidance and leadership from somebody who has been there and who's been kind of through the trenches and can point to some sort of like the potholes or the even understanding. And it's now bi-directional to some extent, right? Where obviously if we want to hire somebody who understands maybe AI a bit more, right, because they're a recent graduate and they understand this, or somebody who's a veteran in tech and they've been in it, so it's almost like, obviously it's not age concerning, and it's not just industry concerning, but it's more of like who, especially with somebody having experience, especially with somebody having something that is time, the only, non-renewable resource, time put in, sweat equity put in, expertise, being that sort of, again, not hoarding information, but giving it. That sort of thing I think is needed, for so many reasons. So I definitely love that approach.
I think a powerful team is a young person and a person with more experience. You put those together, the young person has the energy and the curiosity and the excitement and the awareness of, familiarity with sort of the newer technologies and trends. And then the other, obviously, the elder person has the experience of human nature, past, experiences and what might, what you can look out for, pitfalls. What's a beautiful combination, in my opinion. We try to encourage that.
That's huge. I love that. So I'm gonna run back kind of what we talked about, and you fill in any gaps I may have missed. So, kind of starting with doers and carers, right? So being one that does, but also cares in the act of service. The idea of hospitality, I think, has been a pretty thorough line through this conversation, and all that being for the community, whether that's community of, the consumers at a festival, the audience that is, the engagers for a campaign online, etc. And also making sure that these technological advances are tools, right? We're using them, not being used by us. The next point is the what and the who, right? The two fundamental ideas to understand what problem are we solving, what solution are we aiming at, and who's it for, and how to best understand. Again, being very people focused, we want to make sure we're serving the who's that are going to receive this. Next point, curiosity. That's a huge favorite of mine. Being encouraged not only internally, but also maintaining this sort of like learner's mindset, which it's so cliche, but it's so valuable to whether it's a skill set like music or your professional career, or as I mentioned, with mindset and skill set and character. If you keep that sort of growth mindset, it'll help you and the organization. Last, I would say the point of not getting married to an outcome. Obviously, we set contingencies. We obviously have plans from, say, an operational perspective, specifically in events. But having this sort of fluidity and as is life, right, being comfortable with change is a lot more important, I think, in our space than in a lot of other ones. Anything else you'd want to fill in there?
Uh, Not really. I think you covered quite a bit about what, we could talk about endlessly about the tentacles of everything we've
For
spoken
sure.
about, but I think it's really important in anything you do to kind of try to distill it down as much as you can to be laser focused on the core of what it is you're seeking to do. And so I try not to add or embellish too much and try to stay focused on that. I think you did a really great job of that, and I appreciate the questions.
No, I appreciate you, and I think caring. I love that word. You definitely distilled it down to one. So, going forward, where can people learn more about you or find out what you got going on today?
Well, of course, our website is bcore.com, which is a place to find some of the work we've done, learn a little bit about our employees, learn a little bit about our ethos. Where we focus on creating smiles, which is that emotional connection for all involved. I'm on LinkedIn, the WXO, the World Experience Organization. You might find me at a music festival here and there. I'm a big fan of live music. Love to travel, so look forward to meeting people from all over. Not too much of a self-promoter in that regard these days. Again, I'm trying to be more of a learner and a seeker rather than a speaker.
I love that. Thank you so much, Kelly. Until our next chat, and appreciate your wisdom, brother.
Thank you, man. Have a great one. Take care.
You too.